Hey, William and Mary, Wendy LeBolt here, talking to you about righting what's gone wrong with our youth sports, the secret to keeping the kids in the game. How many of you grew up playing sports? Raise your hand. Keep your hands up. How many of you still play? How many of you are still involved? How many of you have kids in today's youth sports? Me too. We want kids to play sports. It's good for them, right? We know it's good for their hearts. It's good for their minds. It helps them manage their weight. It decreases the risk of their engaging in risky behaviors. It's good for their academics. It helps them focus. And it even pays off in terms of jobs on down the road and in leadership capacities. Now, sports are good for kids. I wanted my kids to have the same opportunity I had. So I signed them up. And when they came looking for coaches, I raised my hand. Me too. I volunteered. The thing is, as I got into the depths of youth sports, I discovered something terrible. Organized sports aren't always good for our kids. Many of them are getting injured. What we find is kids dropping out of play. The National Alliance of Youth Sports says that 70% of kids by the age of 13 drop out of youth sports because they're not fun and they don't want to play. They're selected out as they rise up through the ranks and they learn that they're not good enough to play. Or they're sitting out. Either they're benched because they're second string or they get injured and they can't play. So I waded into this environment to ask what's gone wrong with what used to be so right for us when we were kids. And I found that we're making two critical errors. One in approach. There's been a cultural shift in training for youth sports. And the second, I believe, has to do with our ignorance of the science around kids in sports. So on the first, number one, we're doing way too much adulting in youth sports. I call it the boardroom approach. We're grooming the heir apparent to the CEO. We're training them in the specialization of their skill. We're conditioning them to stand when the rest fall. We are working them out, putting in all kinds of hours. And all of a sudden, sports have become a job for kids. We've taken the boardroom from the business to the kids' field of play. Early specialization is the result. 5 and 6 year olds specializing in one sport. They play the same sport all year long without a break, which all of sports science says is not a good idea. And they play more and more and more hours because we know more is always better, right? And as one might expect, instead of thriving, our kids on the field of play are just surviving. The shift that I've seen is we've been trying to develop athletes and we've forgotten that we're raising children. We're raising children. The second error that we're making, simple but true, and I'm going to explore a bit because this is where I feel I can contribute significantly. Children are not small adults. We know that, but what does that mean? Children, by their very nature, are growing. Their minds, their bodies, their identities are growing. And things that are growing are fragile. And fragile things are easy to break. We're breaking them. Exercise scientists, when we train for a population in the middle of the road, young, healthy, fit people. That's where we prescribe exercise. But for special populations like children, we have to do things differently. And our exercise approach must reflect this. The stage of development that kids are in defines what their bodies can do and what's good for them. Let's take a new walker. Let's look at them, that new baby who sits up and then they rock on all fours, developing that body sense, and they learn to crawl as they get a little coordination. They pull up on the furniture as they gain in strength, and they tip back to stand when they get their balance. These things happen in an order for a reason. And the role of the parents, of course, to run and grab the video camera, capture this moment on film. And yes, that's great. That's great. But really, as people raising children, the two things we need to do are remove the breakables and cushion the landing. Because we know the one thing that happens when every kid learns to walk is they're going to fall. And we need to help them up and help them develop the courage to try and try again. And this should be our approach on the field of play. More parent, less CEO, more growing, less grooming. Our objective in youth sports is both to raise children and also to raise children who are capable to compete in whatever game they're going to play. And I'd like to use a sample skill that I use with kids when I'm training them on the field, where I take the science and where I feel like I can make the most impact. But everyone working with kids on fields of play can use this. Now, true, I have an agenda. It is fitness training. It is injury prevention. But I don't tell them that. I don't tell them that. Let me show you. When I work with kids, I show them the 3 B's: to bend their knees, to be on the balls of their feet, and to keep their head up, to be ready to play. This is the athletic position we've been teaching forever. But kids who haven't grown up playing in the backyard haven't learned it and don't have their sense of balance in their bodies. Then I use a really simple resistance bands. They come in different levels, and we can cut them to different sizes so they can adapt to all ages of kids and young adults and adults. And I have them tie the band around their shins. For soccer players, I tell them about 3/4 of the way up their shin guards. And I teach them to use their athletic position to move this way, to move that way, to move this way, and to move that way. I'm not strengthening them in all directions to put up a fight. I'm stabilizing them so that they can move in the one direction that they want to choose, powerfully, effectively, and safely. But they have to choose. I don't tell them it's fitness. I just show them that they need to keep the rectangle and not have it be a triangle. It becomes a game. I'm preventing knee injuries. They just make it a game. Then I teach them how to jump, but also how to land. So we jump and land. The objective of the landing is to land quietly, and I make that a competitive game. Who can land the quietest? It's a game, but what I'm teaching them is to cushion their landing, which is good for their knees, but also allows them to jump and land so they can jump again and reach as high as they want to and as powerfully as they can. Then we take these skills and then we put them into a game that I call resistance band tag. The game looks very much like whatever sport they play. And at the end, the one left is the winner. They're the exercise band king or queen. They're completely out of breath. And I've never had an experience where kids didn't run up and shout and beg me to play again, to play the game again. I trick them into doing what's good for them. That's been the key to healthy parenting ever since the beginning of time. Hey, Mikey. So, a few years back, I was traveling to a sports medicine conference in Indianapolis, and I had the opportunity to travel to the NCAA Hall of Fame building. And on the eastern window, there's in very large letters, there's a quote that's written over a figure of a female soccer player, and it says this: "There are over 400,000 student athletes, and most of them are going pro in something other than sports." I would say, on our fields of play, we're raising those children. And honestly, I have a dream that one day those children may have children of their own. And I want those kids to beg their parents to let them keep playing, just like we did, because it's good for them. They don't need to know that, as long as we do.